Thank you, Mr. Smith. I really wish that this program was around when I was an undergrad. But if there's one thing that MIT CNC has taught me, it's that your MIT education extends far beyond your 4 years on campus. This series is a great example of that. This event has a lot of personal significance to me because I really owe my career in solar to the alchemy that occurred in this very auditorium at an MIT Energy and Environment Series event 9 years ago. It was a really rousing discussion, a panel discussion of solar leaders of the day, pioneers, if you will. Not only did I gain insight into the industry and an idealistic resolve to contribute, but I also gained a valued friend and champion in the solar industry who just last fall advised me to accept my current position at SunEdison. So in light of my personal experience, I cannot encourage you enough to value and to act on the connections that you've made here tonight. Forgot your business cards? Just look up your new acquaintances on LinkedIn or take a picture of her name badge. And don't forget to follow up with a note tomorrow. I hope that many of you had the opportunity to meet some SunEdison employees over dinner tonight. I think that many of us will tell you that we were drawn to SunEdison because of its bold trajectory, because of its fierce pursuit of bigger, better, faster. But there was one other factor that was very important to me in my job search last fall. SunEdison stands far above most clean tech companies in employing women, in numbers, in engineering, and increasingly in leadership. Clean tech, like the rest of tech, is a male-dominated industry. And I, like many of you, have felt the burden of that imbalance. But workplace equality is not merely a matter of numbers, and it's not only a women's issue. It's a human rights issue that has benefited greatly from the work of men and women alike. Equality benefits all of us. I'm not going to bore you with the statistics, but it requires also the awareness and participation of all of us. I think that Ahmad may have understood that, even as a young man in Lebanon. Ahmad used to work in a liquor store. He did so every Sunday without pay to help his older sister. I imagine that those early experiences helped to form him into the steadfast advocate of diversity and inclusion that he is today, at home, at SunEdison, and for the greater renewable energy industry. Earlier this year, SunEdison, along with the nonprofit Grid Alternatives, announced the program RISE, Realizing an Inclusive Solar Economy. The program allocates $5 million over 2 years to job training and job placement for members of underserved communities. This is just one facet of the fascinating company that is SunEdison. Like you, I am eager to hear more, so it is without further ado and with great pride that I'd like to introduce Ahmad Chatila with the making of SunEdison.
So the first thing I'm going to get is the clicker.
Here you go.
Thank you. Can you just put it on full screen?
Yep.
Thank you. Let me see how this goes. OK. So good evening, everybody. Thank you, Teresa. Really appreciate that. And I didn't know that you know the story about me working in a liquor store. And I did not drink that time. A little bit. So if you're here to learn about technology, I think you're going to be disappointed today. I'm just going to tell you. I can answer any question you want. I've learned enough about the module technology roadmap, solar technology, polysilicon, crystal, wafer, all that. So if you want, we can stick around and we can talk about it for a long time. I'm obsessed with the cost roadmap there. I want to talk about today a little bit the thinking behind transformation. How do you think about transforming a company. And I'm not going to give you answers. We're going to debate these issues. So because of that, I'm going to walk around. I'm going to dizzy the camera a little bit. Okay? So number one, I'm going to tell you a little bit about SunEdison. Actually, the company is called MEMC, Monsanto Electronics Materials Company. My first job as a semiconductor engineer is work on oxygen content in wafers in 1991 to improve gate oxide integrity. That's what I did. And it was an MEMC wafer. And I became CEO of that company in 2009. And after studying around 150 companies in the semi and solar space, I visited them around 4 months period. I did my executive MBA. I got to the conclusion that either we have to exit solar or we have to do something different, because our cost in solar polysilicon was 2 to 3 times higher than our rivals. The cost was around $70 in one factory, a kilo, and $55 in another factory. And the cost of rivals was around $25 a kilo at that time. Okay? The company was started in 1959. Actually, the first company to introduce flat wafers for the semiconductor industry. And it's actually the first company that created epitaxial growth. It's the inventor of epitaxial growth. If you look at Intel Corporation and Samsung and all these companies, they use epi for high-speed chips. Even on memory, in some cases, in Japanese companies, they use it also. And it's the first company to create chemical mechanical polishing, which really flattens the wafer so that you can have a good depth of focus to print so that you can drive Moore's law. So the company has a tremendous heritage. But it woke up one day, and it's a slave company. It's selling semiconductor wafers for customers who really don't care, with a lot of rivals. The other thing that happened is we stumbled on solar. Because we had polysilicon plants, one in Merano, Italy, which was built during Mussolini's time. And actually, it used to make titanium shells during the Second World War. And that factory was built because Mussolini wanted to push the Italian population towards the Austrian Germanic population. So he wanted to build factories and push the Italian population there. The other one is we also absorbed a factory that does fluidized bed reactor technology. And in there, because we were using it, that technology, and the company that was making it wanted to exit, this is way before my time, we were forced to buy the factory. These factories were small. In chemical engineering, it's very simple. The factory has to have scale. It has to have the best technology. It has to be in the right country in terms of labor costs, electricity, and all that. It has to have low feedstock cost or recycle all the feedstock. We didn't have any of them. So because of that, structurally, we're in the wrong thing. So because of that, I was not happy with the results, and I was thinking about what to do. Now, fast forward in 2015, we're a power developer. We develop projects. We own power plants in solar, wind, and hydro. And we are the most valuable renewable energy company in the world. That's what we are today, and the largest developer. So that's in 6 years. The reason why we became very valuable and we took is because of these trends. Now, we can debate these numbers. I have a feeling about from now until some detail to 2020, and I have a feeling to 2030. And I think every time I look at cost roadmaps, we beat them. I always tell that when I started in the semiconductor industry, I started in 1991, and we were printing at the time 650 nanometer or 800 nanometer. And it used to be called submicron technology. Why is it called submicron technology? I think you know. Because people thought we cannot really print below a micron, which is 1,000 nanometer. And today, as you know, Intel Corporation has 14 nanometers in production in 2015 and 2014 before. So we always beat these roadmaps. So let me share with you some. In solar, the module used to be cost, when I became a CEO and I bought SunEdison, and we used to buy modules, $2.50 a watt. Today, we buy them in India for 51 cents. And because of that, in an average country, with an average installation of 1,500 or 1,600 hours, without government support, you can get to 6 cents, give and take a kilowatt hour. That's not bad. Not bad at all. Now we're competing. And remember, solar doesn't need transmission and distribution if you do it on residential. Now, residential is a little bit more expensive, but it will get there too. By 2020, because of improvement in efficiency and the bill of material cost of modules, and because of thinner wafers and various other techniques and lower cost of poly, faster and longer time of crystal pulling, we will get to 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Where does gas stand now? Where does gas stand? And by 2030, we think that it'll be 1 to 2 pennies. So it is going to be absolutely transformative. Now, I'm not saying other technologies cannot improve. They should. And actually, I'm a believer that we have to have tremendous R&D in many, many technologies for us to be a great country and for all countries to be great societies. So we have to develop all kinds of technologies. And the more we are aggressive, the better. But in solar, which I know, is going to be ultra low cost in a transformative way. Wind, I was surprised with my visits to some companies, and I think they're going to be in the 2 to 3 pennies by 2020. Today, they're in the 4 cents. I thought wind is flattened out, but it's not true. Simply not true. And based on some of the ideas that I was shown, and I'm not an expert in wind technology, I'm confident that there will continue to be a trend to improve wind cost structure. Now, why these trends are there? Because these technologies are newer in nature versus coal, for example. Coal had its trajectory for around 80 or 90 years. Okay, great. So now we have learned a lot, but now it's harder to push the technology cost lower. And in solar and wind, where it's newer. Storage is the same way. So let me give you some data. If actually, one of the companies that I'm very impressed with is Tesla. And the reason is because of the thinking of how they attack problems. And one of the key players there is the CTO of Tesla. His name is J.B. Straubel. He's an amazing guy and has a great team. And one of the things that he showed me is for Model 3, which is this is not proprietary information. I'm going to share what they have told everybody. So Model 3, which is a $35,000 car, is going to have a 200-mile range, 200 miles in 2017. But storage technology in lithium-ion doubles its density every 10 years. It's been going at 7% per year, every year, like a clock. Now, in the future, there will be other technologies. But let's think about just lithium-ion for a little bit. And since today we're in the 150 watt-hours per liter, and the theoretical limit that people talk about is 1,000. And I think that theoretical limit is just like in semiconductors with photolithography, how we went to submicron, G-line, I-line, deep UV, scan, and now immersion tools. So this is sorry for being a geek. I think in lithium-ion technology and other technologies that are the main drivers, they will be improved. What does that mean, what I just said with these numbers on storage technology? If it doubles every 10 years, that means by 2027, the same car with the same size of battery can drive 400 miles without recharge. And in 2037, it will drive 800 miles without a recharge. And 3 years after that, it will be at 1,000 miles without a recharge. Now, raise your hand if you think oil can compete with that. One person. Okay, hang him outside. This is not a democratic process, all right? I mean, but think about it. Think about that transformation. And the other thing that you should think about in here, and since there's 1 billion vehicles in the world today, 1 billion vehicles, and that fleet converts every 15 to 16 years, and most oil companies tell you there are going to be 2 billion vehicles by 2040. Every car, since it's 75 kilowatt hours, that means 1 million cars will give you 75 gigawatt hours of storage. And each car is a 10,000 watt DC charging. That means it's a 10 gigawatt. 1 million cars will have 10 gigawatts. Now, the worldwide generation capacity is 6,300 gigawatts. So let's imagine a billion cars. 1 billion cars will have 75 terawatt hours of storage and 10 terawatt of generation, potentially. Now, you tell me, how do you like that? That's pretty amazing. So these things that happen here are not one person that's creating. Because no matter how J.B. Straubel is brilliant, he took a lot from other people who've developed these technologies over the years. Many people have worked on this. In many companies on solar, solar is a diode. Many companies worked on it for a long time, including in the semiconductor space. Most of the technology we use in solar today is things we used in semi before, like diffusion tubes. Okay? Some of the implantation techniques to improve the junction of a solar cell. So a lot of these things, millions of people have worked on this stuff. Just a river, okay? And we are taking advantage of it. And that's our volume. When we bought SunEdison, they did 38 megawatts in 2009, and we bought a few other companies. And we changed the name to SunEdison because I wanted a better brand. And in 2014, we did 1,050 megawatts. This year, we told the outside world we'll do 2,200 megawatts. And next year, we'll do 2,900. But let me give you some data. We are signing in Q1. In Q1 2015, we signed 85 megawatts a week. A week, 85 megawatts a week. A gigawatt or more, a quarter of new signings. That does not include the residential business that we have, which we will do around 400 megawatts this year between residential and commercial and industrial. So the sky's the limit, and we're taking advantage of the trends that I shared with you before. Okay? Because of that, we went from a $3 billion market cap, and now we have 3 entities, and we're adding another one. The SunEdison company is worth more than $8 billion. The Terraform Power, which is our yield co, which is a vehicle we drop our assets in, because we want to become a power company with consistent cash flows. It's worth around $5 billion. The semiconductor business, we spun it off as a separate company because now we have to become so large in renewables. We wanted semi to be on its own, to compete on its own. And the semi business had a great leader. His name is Shaker Sadasivam, and has a great team with him. And they have improved the market share of that business over a 5-year period. It went from, MEMC had 100% market share one day, and the day I walked in as CEO, it had 4% market share. And then we assigned a team, and that team have really improved market share. It took it to 14%. And because of that, they were able to rejuvenate the business and go public again. And this is a company that created EPI and CMP and the flat wafer that we know today in silicon. And finally, we have Terraform Global, which is another yield co, but for emerging markets, for India, China, Brazil, Malaysia, Thailand, South Africa, these places. And it's not public yet. So that's what happened, okay? So now, how do you really make SunEdison, right? How do you do it? I have learned around 12 techniques. In strategy, I have learned personally from Peter Drucker the most, the strategic mindset. In organizational management and DNA of companies, I've learned the most from a professor at Stanford. His name is James March. James March, he's around maybe 88, 89 years old today, and he is a genius. He's a brilliant man, and I learned a lot from him about leadership and how to think about companies and how to really ensure that the company grows. And he's a giant of a giant. He's actually a guru's guru. He's not known, but he's amazing. And I learned a lot from him. In operations, I learned from the companies that I worked in. I learned a lot from reading from Andy Grove. He had a book called High Output Management that I strongly urge you to read. Of course, there's a lot of engineers here. I'm sure you read his books on physics, you know, Deal Grove model, how to grow oxide on a silicon. You maybe even read his strategy book called Only the Paranoid Survive. But I strongly urge you to read his book on high output management, how to supervise people effectively. But instead of going in with the 12 ideas I'm going to share with you today, okay, 2 only. So one is on leadership, and one is how to be balanced in managing a company. So let's start. Number 1, do you know this person? Raise your hand if you've seen this person before. All right, who's this person? Exactly, everybody knows. Did he have a big impact on history? All right, good. Who's this person? Exactly, Alexander. Raise your hand if you heard about Alexander the Great. Almost everybody. Did he have an impact on history? Yes. All right, so leaders have huge impact on history, right? So let's see about this question that I'm going to ask you. Raise your hand if you think CEOs are overpaid. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. 50-50, maybe majority, but Not everybody wants to raise. You're not insulting me. Actually, this is a challenge. If leaders are so effective and so important in history, why can't we then pay them a lot of money? Do you know? Why don't we pay CEOs a lot of money, since clearly leaders have huge impact on history? Some of them are not good. So some of them we shouldn't pay, but some of them we should pay a lot. Is that what you're saying? Did you raise your hand that CEOs are overpaid? You did. What I paid last year? A lot more than many people in this world. A lot more. But most of my compensation was performance-based. So if the company does well, I make money. If the company doesn't do well, I still make a lot of money, but not as much money as other people. So why do we struggle with that? We think leaders are very important. They have huge impact on history. Yet when we look at CEO pay, we sometimes cringe. And it's not only because some of them don't do a good job. Because we look at our own performance and we think, all right, this CEO is doing a great job. She is amazing. But does she worth 1,000 times more than I do? Is she worth 100 times more than the person who's working on innovation in a diffusion tube in a semiconductor company? Alan, he and I worked together. He worked for me. And we worked on tungsten silicide, right? Alan, is a CEO worth 1,000 times or 100 times more than you? Yeah. You can answer honestly. You're my friend. Well, the reason why we go with that, because I think we are mistaken by thinking that leaders have a huge impact on history. Really, we do. Because our thinking is not correct. That's my opinion. And that drives SunEdison's strategy a little bit. So let me tell you how you can get to a point to really appreciate that leaders have impact, but it is overestimated. And because of that, then you can resolve the issue of, well, leaders maybe are not as important as we think. They should get paid because they work incredibly hard. Some of them are really smart, so on and so forth, but not a few hundred times more than the average person. So number one is look at this. Do you know these two people? Isaac Newton is one. Who's the other one? Leibniz. What the thing that they have in common, these two? Leibniz was a philosopher and something else, and Isaac Newton did a lot of things on physics. But what the people that now is resolved that both of them created the same thing at the same time, although there was a lot of controversy? Calculus. Think about it. At the same time, two incredible people invent calculus at the same time. Now, they were sharing letters and all that, but really, now it's known, a lot of research has been done that both of them have created it separately. How can that happen? Wow, what a lucky thing. We have 100,000-year history as human beings or more, as from drawing and so on and so forth, from 20, 30,000 years. I don't know what it is. And all of a sudden, within a 10-year period or 5-year period, two people invent calculus at the same time. What does this say? There's a lot of things leading up to that. Exactly. The time is right. And if they didn't create it, do you think someone else would have? Absolutely, because there's so many people who work really hard and are smart, and they could have gotten there. And they had to build a lot on Greek math, Indian math, and much other European math to get to the point to do this. So reality world, the way you should see it, is almost like a river. And the river is going to move forward. And someone's going to be swimming up front. And we're going to think, wow, that person is great. But reality is, someone always going to be there. And to go and give CEOs a lot of money because they're just opportunists, because that's what I did. I took the opportunity. A lot more than the average person, I think, is not healthy, because it gives a lot more credit where the credit is not 100% due. Now, I'm not saying that the ideas of limiting CEO pays are good. Sometimes the medicine is worse than poison, because then you have to have really social justice. Are you telling me that Michael Jordan is okay to get a lot of money by playing great basketball, but a CEO who's created billions of dollars worth of value is cannot get the money? What about Warren Buffett? What if he was born in Tanzania and he is African and he's a woman? Do you think he'll have $55 billion? No, of course not. So we have to look at that as really a model that most of us take advantage of what happened before us. And because of that, leaders are overestimated. They're over-aggrandized. And there's two reasons for it. Number one, in my view, is we want to create something simple in our head about history. So we do that. That's number one. So we give names, and we like to say that that leader had a huge impact and go say great things about them. And number two is what Eric Fromm said, who's someone who was a philosopher and psychologist. He wrote something called Escape from Freedom. We want to escape from freedom and give power to someone because we sees them as our dad, our father. We don't want to have the freedom to be our own people and be our own leader because it's so much pressure to be independent. So we give it to others. And because of that, we have to wake up to that fact. And one other, the most seminal work on this, that leaders are not important, is this book, where the writer said it's not a novel. Actually did a lot of work on history. But War and Peace shows that Napoleon and the Russian generals were not in charge. They were just flowing with it. You would think that they were leading the battle. So how can Napoleon lead the battle? When he would send a messenger, it will take hours to get there and hours to come back, and the terrain has changed. So by the time his information got to the field, already the field has changed and people ignored him. And by the time people went back, because Napoleon, different than Alexander fought at the front. Napoleon was always in the back. Napoleon, by the time he gave information and the information came back to him, it's already too late. So he never really led. By design. It's like having an asynchronous memory chip. All right? It's like data comes in at not always in a synchronized time. There's no clock. It's not pipelined well. So that's a book you should read. And because of that, then I'll come to SunEdison. This is why we're successful. This is one of our leaders. He is our CFO, Brian Wubbles. Julie Blunden, our Chief Strategy Officer. Where's Julie? Over there. OK, she is in the back. Brandon Middaugh, she was my Chief of Staff, and now she's moving to lead all integration of the assets we're going to buy in our Terraform Global. And where's Brandon? There she is, another leader. Carlos Dominic, the CEO of Terraform. Paul Gaynor, he's the president of our North American business. Pashupati Gopalan, our president of Asia, running it from India for China, Japan, Korea, everything. Pancho Perez, our chief operating officer. Matt Herzberg, our HR executive. And Tamra, she's my new chief of staff. Manny Hernandez, our chairman. And Georgianne Proctor, one of our board members. As well as me. I did also some work. So because of that, we have a lot of people, a lot of leaders, and there's a lot of employees that do a lot of work. Some people worked on tracker technologies. They took it from what we used to buy it at 43 cents a watt, and today the cost is 11 cents a watt, with a roadmap to 8 or 9 cents a watt. I mean, some people really made us successful. That's what makes a company. So the way you then lead and transform is through capability building. That's one thing we have extensively used. And because of that, whenever we acquired company, we never lost that entrepreneurs. Because the CEO is not the center of the universe. Because the CEO is overestimated his power or her power to lead. And I recognize that. And I don't say it because, one day I woke up and I said, I'm going to be a good guy. It's just as a realization of the truth. And if you don't follow the truth, you're going to get crushed. I don't want to be successful. So I have to follow what I think makes sense. So you do it through teamwork, diversity of ideas, through diversity of backgrounds of people, purpose, which is very essential. Many people miss that. What's the purpose of the company? It's different than culture, different than mission, different than all that. It's the purpose of the company. Why do we come to work? And the purpose of SunEdison is to transform lives through innovation. That's why you see us do a lot of work on rural electrification, women in leadership, so on and so forth. Culture and shared values. So that's idea number one. Any questions about this?
It's a counterpoint, but I have an
Alternative view.
Yeah, which is that I broadly agree with you that CEOs and leaders are overestimated, and when we study history, we only study it through the lens of leaders. But wouldn't you also say that whether it's a country or an organization, the basic ingredients are usually in place, but an effective leader is one that acts as an effective catalyst who can bring all those energies and talents and synergies together and being able to galvanize the groups, as it were. So in that respect, don't you think the leader's role is important?
Yeah, I'm not saying, I didn't say the leader's role is not important. Because I wouldn't be doing that job. I have to be delusional. But you're right, absolutely. Leaders are important, but they're overestimated. So they can be a catalyst, but they're not the only one. They can't be everywhere. They're not watching everywhere. So they can damage companies, and they can help companies.
That's also competency.
The competency-related issue? Well, you have to be a super genius with supercomputer to be able to do everything in a company, because the company requires thousands and thousands of things that happen at the same time.
Ahmad, 1950 to 1980, leadership was command and control in the company, like army. But for the last 2 decades, leadership is defined as a participative, distributed power, collaborative, teamwork. You have any comment in that area, why command control is dead now?
Well, the more you educate people and get them to believe in themselves and become knowledge work, you cannot really do command and control. You have to give them freedom, because human beings, if you think about 2 things that human beings need that will get you tomorrow on any organization. Number 1, they would like to be appreciated by the people around them, and they feel that they have value. And number 2, they have to have the freedom to act. Give them some freedom to act. These 2 main thrusts will allow you to run any organization. In the command and control, the more capital was the most important thing, and hence the people who are driving that at the top, then people have to comply and there's not enough jobs. But today with the mobility and the knowledge work, the power has shifted towards employees, and because of that, that's why we were forced to work on these sophisticated techniques to keep people around. So yes. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there a common characteristic that everybody up on that wall shares?
Oh, sure. I'm not saying that you don't want to work hard, have initiative, be a team player, be open-minded, be strategic. You have to have a lot of different ways to be on that wall. You can't stay home and expect to be effective or be valuable. But the message is you cannot do it by yourself. There's no way.
When you say that your purpose is to have diversity in backgrounds, in gender, etc., how do you keep people from feeling that they're there because of the latter values that you just mentioned versus the former?
Okay. Our purpose is not to have diversity. Our purpose is to transform lives through innovation.
Okay.
To be able to reach that, we have to have a diversity of opinion. Why is that important? Because the decision-making improves, the customer base becomes matched to us, because the customer base is diverse, and we need to be matched to them. And you get a lot more talented people. The way you fail is you think that you have to choose between incredible people or having diversity. I found it to be a non-issue. You just have to be open-minded. There's so many great people everywhere. And the decision-making of the company, since I work for the shareholders, and the way to improve shareholder return is to have better decision-making. And in better decision-making, you need more diverse opinion. Then it's a duty for me to have a diverse organization. Otherwise, I don't have a good decision-making. Now, in non-diverse, if you know exactly what you want to do, and the world's not going to change, it's better to be exactly single file. Command and control, one decision, uniform group. Uniform groups usually die first in any environmental shifts. Actually, if you look at bioengineering, species that are very well set to a given environment, they're the first to die when the environment changes because they're so synchronized to the environment. And that same thing in organization. You have to have a very diverse. So part of my duty to give shareholder value is to have diverse team. Thank you.
Hi, Ahmad. Just a follow-up question on the theory that you're proposing here, which your experience with leadership is much more than mine, so I'm going to take it for for sake on that. But the theory you're bringing forward is that the leader is really the value of the leader is in identifying, selecting, and empowering and nurturing the right team around them to propel the river behind them, right? So the right leader really looks behind themselves versus looking forward, which is really good. The question that I would have on that is, as you look at SunEdison, and as an employee, I have a vested interest in this question, right? So as you build the capabilities, how do you identify the right leaders for those different areas to propel forward? Obviously, like you said, each area is different, each capability is different, different strengths, different characteristics that you might look for. So as you build this team and as you've continued to build the SunEdison team, how have you gone about that exercise?
It's very hard, but we have a very methodical process, and still it's not perfect. We do a 2-day, what is called Session C process, where we review the top 200 people in detail. And that review is a calibration session of all the reviews of all the divisions. So that's number one. We have multiple programs, including the Black Belt Green Belt program on lean and culture. We have a program for the mid-level managers that we vote on and figure out that they have a shot at being at the top, and the top 25 executives vote on that. And we go on and try to develop people. So we do it, and it's not easy because it's a really statistical model. And the more you pay attention to it, the better. But what I learned is if you focus on the top and ensure the top is managing well, there's something called shadow of the leader. Then below, they'll do a much better job at supervising and developing people. And I don't know if you've been with us for a long time, but we have a vote also on who's the best supervisors in the company. And we vote on the top 200 or 250. And I'll tell you my score. I got 70%, meaning I'm not the best. And I work on it really hard. And I'm not the bottom. And not everybody sees the data except for me. I see everybody's data. But you get a form with statistics on, are you good in giving direction? Are you good in being straightforward with your employees? And you get 13 questions, and you get the statistics on it. And how do you compare to the rest of the population? So we try to work on it all the time, nonstop, because it is an issue. It's never good enough. Thank you for the question. All right. Yeah?
Hold up.
So Ahmed, based on what you've talked about, there's an incredible amount of transparency within the organization with respect to data. At what point is that? How transparent is that in terms of everything in the and information? At what point does it stop, and at what point, and for what reasons?
Yeah, we do not share HR data about where you get voted in with anybody but yourself. 360 feedback is for you to improve. And transparency is very important to have a healthy culture. So for example, our board of directors are involved a lot with the decision making, but you don't want to overdo it where you hurt people's feelings because it's counterproductive. You want to give them feedback that is direct and honest, but without being brutal, without being obnoxious. And that's how it is. Now, in terms of transparency, the only limit that we don't know how to manage perfectly is we're a public company. And to give information to anybody, especially when you have 6,000 employees or 4,000, and you just have one bad apple to share data with the outside becomes dangerous. So that one, we only share, for example, financial data with the top 500 people. We don't share it with everybody. And we don't spread it around the company except when we publish outside. Thank you.
Yeah, so I agree with everything you said about leadership and leadership qualities. But I have a question about CEOs being overpaid. What about free markets?
Yes, you're correct.
So, you know, we have free markets here, and if CEOs were overpaid, wouldn't they be adjusted? Wouldn't the pay be adjusted?
If it's really a free market and it's a fair system, yes. I'm actually not convinced that the way CEO salaries are designed in this country, which is the best place to really have transparency about CEOs and corruption, so on and so forth, as compared to any country. I don't think it's really, really well designed. And the reason is because you get these consulting firms and they tell you what the CEO should get paid, and it accelerates all the time. So, and you always want to give your CEO a little bit above the mean, but that accelerates every year because you're always above the mean, right? So the mean is always moving up much faster than the per capita income of the society. So by default, you have acceleration in that. Now I tell you, sorry? You see, for me, I don't know how to solve it, except I'll tell you. Let's talk about how we train, for example, some of people in the MBA classes. I'm going to give you 6 words or 6 terms, and you tell me which ones come up in MBA schools very often. CEO has to be strategic. Does it come up? That strategy is important. Raise your hand if you think it is the case. Okay? CEO has to be very generous. Does it come up in MBA schools? No one raised their hand. Okay, great. You almost did. CEOs have to be great in execution. All right. CEOs have to have responsibility for the people around them. Okay? 50-50. CEOs have to be great in managing people. Okay? CEOs have to be courageous. We teach them in MBA schools that CEOs have to be courageous. Few people raise their hand. Okay. You see, the thing is, we teach people that you have to be a strategist. You have to be great in execution. And you have to manage your people well. But we don't teach them as much that they have to be courageous, that they have to have generosity, and they have to have responsibility. We don't tell them all the time. Now, half of you raise your hand about responsibility. I don't agree. I don't agree in MBA schools. Really, people go to classes and learn about being responsible. They're not about finance. They always vote to go. I mean, there's a voting, which class you want to go to. Go to finance, strategy, things that really are incredible. You can get an investment banking job out of or a consulting firm job on. But we don't teach kids that way, and we have to teach them that way. Now, generosity doesn't mean you give your money away, but you share a little bit more with the people around you in terms of the stage that you're on. Sharing credit with others. That's generosity. Being responsible is feeling responsible. If you really care about the company that you're in and you're getting paid well, why do you have to get paid more? And courage to make real tough decisions that really go counter to the consequences of your career because you think it's the right thing to do for the company. That we do not teach. No one is willing to, everybody's willing to make a lot of money, but no one is willing to do, actually few people are willing to take the sacrifice required. And until we teach all the people around us about this issue, I don't think we're going to get to a point where we can have an easy dialogue here. Now, the medicine is worse than the disease sometimes. So people, let's cut CEO salaries, or we need to limit it. Well, then you have to do it for a lot of people around. All right? Now, I'm not giving you answers, but I think you have to debate a lot of these things and ensure that teamwork is tremendous in trying to transform a company. So that's idea number 1. Let's go to idea number 2. It's a little bit more controversial, the next one. It's having a balanced DNA. James March talked about 2 things in our organization that you need to have a healthy DNA. To have exploration and exploitation. Exploration is you explore ideas. You don't know if they're going to work, but you explore them and you try them. Exploitation is when you figure out an idea is great, you exploit it and you ramp it, you drive it, you make a lot of money out of it. In jobs that we have in corporations, how many of you work in a corporation? Okay, many. Which jobs fall under exploitation? Give me some names. Sales. Marketing. No. Some marketing, but not most of it. Manufacturing. Finance. Scaling. Operations. Supply chain. Tax avoidance. That sometimes it's in my team, the guy who runs it, he's an explorer. Cut this from the IRS. I really didn't want to say this. So yes, these are the functions. Legal. Explorers. R&D. Most marketing. Yes. And business development. Okay? So let's put it here. Exploration and exploitation. All right? Who do you think have more credibility in companies and why? Raise your hand if exploitation teams have more credibility in companies. Raise your hand if explorers have more credibility in companies.
It depends.
It depends, yeah. It's 2/3, 1/3, the way I saw it in here. 2/3 is exploitation, 1/3 is exploration. It depends, actually, and depends on the company. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you a cartoon that Tamara told me not to show because it's too extreme, but I'm going to show you anyway. I put that R&D business development usually in companies have lower credibility. I put 0 in here. It's not true. I worked in R&D. I worked in many of these functions. It's not true. But it has less. Why does it have less credibility? The unknown. Sorry? It's a cost center. Uncertainty. Exactly. You're working on things that you don't know, because you don't have the history. You don't know what the future is going to be. So by default, you're exploring. Like Magellan, he goes away. He might never come back. We never heard about him. But we did. There's no history. So because of that, you don't know if you're going to execute. Because credibility comes from execution, from keeping your commitments. Exploitation, you know history. If you're in sales, there's a business process for sales. If in manufacturing, you can use lean techniques. You can use constraint theory for manufacturing. There's a lot of techniques you can use. And you have factory performance before, you can know the future. And if you've done the first factory in your life, some other people have done factories too. They've done the chemicals into it, all the piping, so on and so forth. So it has a lot of history. So exploitation has a lot more credibility. So what happens in organizations? Who get promoted? Who usually get promoted faster in companies? Exploiters. Because they're credible, because they meet their commitments, supposedly. And that's why you look at board of directors. They're half of them CFOs, and the other half are guys who are exploiters. So there's maybe one R&D guy, just like you go to a zoo. There's always a monkey in a zoo. So you put someone, because you have to have a zoo. If you have a zoo, you have a monkey, right? You might not have a tiger, you might not have an elephant, but you always have a monkey in a zoo. Most boards are made of exploiters. If you explore all the time, you will not deserve to see your fruits in the future because you're not paying your bills in the present. If you exploit all the time, you will not have a future. Okay?
Where will you put the people like Steve Jobs?
I would tell you that Steve Jobs is a person who appreciates this tremendously. He's an entrepreneur. I don't know if he's a strategic planner, but he's an entrepreneur. And he is someone who really have defined the company of Apple perfectly, which is it's a software company that packages its products beautifully. Versus if you look at Samsung, it's a hardware company that uses software just to sell more hardware. And you can see the DNA of companies, how they work. He appreciates this. And actually, Apple appreciates the exploration very well, but they have great exploiters. And that balance have made them really powerful. Actually, most companies that are successful do not do this, where exploiters have more power. And that balance, and believe me, I'm CEO of the company. The pressure is on when you're with the board and the executives, and the criticism that you get on taking risk on exploitation. The risk is hard. Many times, my board asked me to fire some executives because they are explorers. Because they said they're going to do something, I didn't do it. But I would never do that. And that's why SunEdison has done incredibly well. So because of that, balance is key. You have a question over there.
Isn't there a shift over time as the company grows to being more conservative and more towards exploitation?
Is there a shift? What you said is shift in a company to, as it grows, to go from explorers to exploitation? Absolutely, because all companies, look, first of all, you have to know, all things start small, and then they become big. And when they start small, they start because of exploration. We're exploring an idea. So that's a startup. And as it grows, you want to execute. And a lot of the planning around it, annual operating plan, meeting your commitments, telling the street something, and all of a sudden it puts massive shackles on the organization to force it not to explore. So yes, it gets like that. But then you have to do something about it. Otherwise, you cannot change the company from one thing to the next if you see the danger coming to you. Just imagine if I stayed in polysilicon. You know, today our market cap is twice as much as most of the polysilicon guys. One of them, we're 4 times more valuable. Another one's twice. And they have massive capacity, and they had lower cost than us, and they were more successful than us. And they had better operating people than us, better roadmap, so on and so forth. And our value is more because we had to make the shift by balancing both. And this is my presentation. Any questions? So if I answered your question, why are you asking me?
You see, I was wondering when I work at a big company, in R&D engineering, never get promoted. So I have to leave the company to start my own. That answers the question.
All right. Well, look, I'm not saying that R&D people don't get promoted. Clearly, some of them do to the highest level. In a company I worked in, it was filled with R&D people, but it's more operationally minded.
Do you have an Explorer advisory board that you work, a technical advisory board or something like that, in addition to obviously a board of directors?
I don't. We thought about it a few times, and I don't. Honestly, I don't. I wish I do sometimes. And some things because the weakness of SunEdison today is I don't have enough balance between financiers and engineers. And the financiers are explorers. Some of them are incredible explorers, and some of them are here. And they have made tremendous amount of value for the company. But sometimes what happens in industries are like this. In industries, the beginning of time is a technology issue. That's how it starts. And the technology will be a barrier. Once the technology is understood, then it shifts from a technology innovation to business model innovation. And after that moment, after the business model innovation, when there's a change in the environment, you need to be technology savvy. And actually, that's why if you look actually at the computer industry, and I'm not trying to, both companies I'm going to mention, they're incredibly successful. One is Dell, one is Apple. Dell couldn't make the shift because they didn't have enough engineers that understood what's going on. Because they had a great business model innovation that used Intel and Microsoft product. And if you look at Dell, it's a distributor of Microsoft product. It's not a computer company. They just put boxes around what Microsoft and Intel have really created. And I'm undermining that discussion, but reality is, as compared to Apple, you know, the CapSense technology, touch, all these, which few of us were at Cypress at the time working on it. You go to Dell, they didn't really grasp a lot of these things. Apple, oh, we would like to get an exclusivity with you from day one. So the difference is deep understanding of technology value. And when you make that transition, when the environment change, if you're not vertically integrated and you understand all the pieces, you're unable to assemble them anymore because you're so horizontal in one dimension that you don't have appreciation for others. And SunEdison can fall into that trap in the long run. So because of that, I am a little bit paranoid on having a little bit more engineers.
Could you talk about your own company's R&D and percent of revenues, for example, as one measure, and how far into the future do you look and engage in projects?
Yeah. So in terms of how do we engage in projects, we're strategic about markets. So we went to India in January 2010. And now it's paying off. But in terms of projects on technology, when I came into the company, the feedback that I got is we have to do something about the R&D roadmap. So we worked on polysilicon. Remember the $70 a kilo thing? We worked on what is called high-pressure silane FBR. In the beginning, we created a lab. Shekhar Sadasivam and Dr. Milind Kulkarni came to me and said, let's create a lab just to learn. And with that, we created high-pressure silane FBR. And we took the FBR reactor productivity from what was around 800 metric ton. It used to be around 500, but we improved it to 800. 800, and now it is in production 7,500. And it'll be 6,500 metric ton per reactor per year. And it's going to be 10,000 with our Ultra FBR. And that's a 2009 to 2017, 18 roadmap, okay? On other technologies, we're the same. Always have a long-range thinking and take some risk. The same thing with crystal technology. We bought a company called Solex. We put a lot of people on it. We improved it. We took the productivity of the puller from 12 metric ton per puller per year, and now it's around 45 with a roadmap to 55, which is 3x the Chinese puller. So we actually think long term, but the amount of spend that we do is close to around 30 million a year, which is truly 0.5% of the company. But you don't need more. It's like what I need to spend more on in R&D is software and areas where we're not comfortable with. So the hardware side, we're okay. The software is what I feel that we need to do a little bit more. Thank you for your question.
In your view, why some companies...
He worked in semiconductor for a long time. I had to listen to him.
In your view, why some established companies dies while others keep thriving? In last 30 years, let us say. Like Kodak is gone, DEC is gone, those kind. And Dell is gone, while the Apple is thriving and the other things.
Well,
what
Dell
is your
not
view?
gone, but there's not one answer. In my point of view, there's not one answer. Some of them die because while Kodak recognized the shift to digital photography, but they didn't know what to do about it. They didn't know how to have a departure because they tried to solve it by continuing to be in pictures the way they thought pictures are. Maybe they should have gone into medical equipment or something else, right? Some other companies died because the leadership is too focused on the short term. Some of them is a structural thing, but there's many, many reasons. The main thing is to really have more balance in the company between exploration and exploitation, because you have to explore and turn a lot of rocks to really be effective. You cannot do it with just one shot or one idea.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask questions. I really appreciate you sharing both team leadership, diversify, and also balance. I got a different question. Where and how do you see for SunEdison's direction? Will SunEdison become a utility company or even more specific residential utility company down the line?
Yeah. So the way I look at it is like this. The worst company you can be in today is to do a commodity with no brand and no product, like steel, okay? That's tough. You evolve into creating a product. From there, the product, evolution of that strategy to have a solution. To evolve the company further, you take it from a solution to a platform. So a platform is what Apple has. iTunes and iMac and all that feed on itself, right? And you tag along to that is a strong brand. So not only you have a platform, but you have a brand. So that's why Kodak took a long time for it to die. And even today, the brand is very strong. I mean, people recognize that brand. A better, lower risk company is a company that does service. Why is that? Because it has 7 to 10 year contracts. So even if the CEO becomes drunk, the company will survive because it has these 7 to 10 year contracts. So it will continue to have enough cash flows to pay for its bills. So as long as that company has a similar risk profile, growth profile, it's more valuable than a company that is on a treadmill. Because no matter how Apple is great, if next year they don't develop a great product, they will have a hard time, even if they have $200 billion in cash. They're on a treadmill. A service company is lesser of a treadmill. But the issue for the service companies, they don't own the assets, they're just servicing. The evolution of that is what we're doing. which 20-year contracts, and adding these cash flows on top of each other and having tremendous amount of cash flows on things that we own, and there's a residual value. So after 20 years, I still own the land and the interconnection site. And the best one, which is illegal, is monopoly. So that's why Aramco and these companies are incredibly valuable. And utilities are very valuable, but they have no growth. Because of that, their multiple is not that strong, and they're limited where they do. So I'm trying to create something that is low risk, very low risk, because it has 20-year contracts, and it's high growth and consistent cash flow. So it's a beautiful model, and that's what I'm trying to do. With that, I want to feed it with a lot of innovation too. Because the biggest danger for a company in that space of having 20-year contracts and being a monopoly, there's two risks. One, you become less agile because you want to protect your eggs. You already made it. Why do you want to make a change? Risk number one. Risk number two is you're arrogant. You're making money. Why do we have to change? Yeah, we're pissing off customers, but the cash flow continues to come. These are the two risks. And because of that, we implement in our culture two words, humility and humble, to really enforce that. And we are a very agile company. And I hope it will continue, because I won't be a CEO forever, and I hope they will continue to be agile. And the culture continues to be humble and have humility. That's what we try to do.
I want to switch gears slightly and go back to your purpose and the goal which the company has to power 20 million people by 2020 and provide energy access in developing countries. I'm curious actually to share, to learn more about your thought and your team's thought about how this thinking came about and what the vision is around energy access in developing countries.
Okay. Our purpose is to transform lives through innovation. The genesis of the idea is way before SunEdison. Is Pashupati Gopalan, one of the people that I showed there. He and I worked together for a long time. And both of us, we used to have fantasized about employing 1 million people in India one day. I'm not from India, but we wanted to make a difference. And when I became in a powerful position, and he was too, we wanted to do something about it. And we didn't think that about employing people anymore, but how to transform people's lives in some ways. We didn't use the term, but that's what we thought. So we started experimenting of how to do it and what the business model we need to do. And with that, it evolved our thinking to now we think we have a business model where we can have rural electrification that is cost effective. And at a unit, it has a healthy economics where we can ramp it. And also what we did is solar water pumps, which is amazing. It's an amazing thing. Solar water pumps, if you go to India, most farmers get the electricity many times. There's 28 million pumps. 28 million pumps. 19 million pumps are diesel, and around 19 million are grid connected, and around 8 or 9 million are diesel. If you convert them to solar, it's 125 gigawatts. That's how much it is. In diesel, the cost is very high because by the time, although it's subsidized, by the time it gets to the farmer, it's already very expensive. It goes through what's called the diesel mafia. In grid connected, farmers get the electricity at night sometimes. So they have significant death from cobra bites. And because they don't know when to get the electricity, they overpump water. So places like Rajasthan, which doesn't have a lot of water, you overpump water and the water table goes dark. And at the same time, the farmer, since he has to pump water, he's going after flooding agriculture, things like rice, which doesn't pay very well as compared to vegetables and fruits. So the solar water pump, and it's cost effective, the farmer knows that he's going to get electricity most of the time. He needs around 200 days a year. But in India, you can get around 300-something days a year worth of solar power. And since the farmer knows, he will not overpump water. But then we did another innovation, which is a business model innovation. We told the government that we should have net metering. So the extra electricity, the farmer can pump back to the grid and make money out of it. And because of that, they are now truly incentivized not to overpump water, and they'll make money. And in a time of drought, they will always have an income. And it's an unbelievable solution. Anywhere we go, talk to chief minister, they're very energized by it. And we just actually won a 2.4 megawatt distributed, like around, each one is around 4,000 watts. So it's around 6,000 of these deals. So, and we're going to get a lot more, we think. I mean, last year we did around 7 megawatts. This year we'll do around 25 megawatts of these. So it's an amazing thing, and it's going to transform the lives of people. Now, we did it because this is how we think. And then the thing about it is not about charity at the end, because we also learned that since 2010 is by doing charity, it doesn't work, it doesn't ramp, you need the capital. If you really want to take care of hundreds of millions of people, you have to have a business model. Thank you. All right, you first and then you.
You went through many, many drastic changes, and you have to take a lot of risk, and you have to have a lot of courage. When you take all these risks, do you have a standard methodologies? How do you make decisions in face of you could fail?
Okay.
Right?
I think the biggest risk that you can take is not do anything.
But that's. But do you have like
Methodology?
certain methodology
Of course.
when you are facing uncertainties and a lot of risk? And is there a standard thought process you typically go through in your mind?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, on strategic change, first of all, I'm paranoid about the future, so I think always multiple steps ahead. I'm known to do that. And the way I go by decision making is I always go by unit economics. I have a term that I use that no one knows, but I'll say it now today on TV. It's called physics-based should-cost analysis. So based on physics, I want to have a should-cost analysis. So when someone tells me we shouldn't do trackers, I say, why? It has 48 tons of steel. It has this amount of processing. This is the shipping cost. It should cost us 10 cents. Why are we buying it for 43 cents? So a lot of the changes, they're based on data. You have to really be data-driven and unemotional about it. And whenever you make the change, it has to be a worthy cause. At the end of the day, are you going to be a slave or a master company? Is it a worthy cause? Because in companies, there's only two kinds of companies in this world, masters and slaves. There's no way around it. Someone is dominant, someone is not. And whenever you make that change, you have to become a master of your condition and your future. So I'm willing then to do that. So data-driven and a worthy cause. Should cost. It should cost that much, and it's based on physics, first principles. People don't do that. They listen to consultants, or they talk to this person, or they say, well, that's how they're giving us, or it's a market. That's how the market pays for it. We can't do anything about it. I don't never believe that. I'm never a victim in these things. You really have to be in control over your situation. You cannot be a victim, because once you have that kind of thinking, then the rest is very easy, because the alternative is very risky. But we don't go shoot from the hip and go into something else. You really have to think about it a lot when you make the shifts.
So your concept of balance is very easy to conceptualize for the role of a CEO, because you're managing different divisions, some of which are exploratory and some of which are exploitative. How does that concept translate for the mid-level manager who may be in charge, who may be within a silo? And where do they search out like the opportunities for exploration and opportunities for exploitation?
Great question, and I tell you, it's actually very easy. Because usually, if someone is naturally an exploiter, they really like things in black and white. No one likes to be micromanaged, but exploiters, they like to be told, this is the goal, go get it. It's in black and white. Explorers are very comfortable in the gray zone. Very comfortable in ambiguous situations. But what happens in ambiguous situations, you can't manage organization in ambiguous situations, because people need to know what they need to do. So at the mid-level manager, you need to appreciate the people who show tendencies of both in your organization. Within R&D, within finance, within each of these silos, there's both kinds. And the way you balance is to have diverse backgrounds and opinions. Same thing about backgrounds of people, same thing about the orientation of how people think. And you train your people, you never judge them. You never say, you're an exploiter, you're an explorer. Never do that. You don't want to humiliate them, you don't want to put them down, but you teach them to stretch. So if someone is an explorer, you get them to stretch to appreciate and do a little bit more exploitation. And if someone is an exploiter, you get them to stretch to do more exploration. And at the mid-level manager, you have that all the time.
So with this Yield Co. as a model for financial exploration leading to commercial exploitation. Could you talk a little bit about that? And is there an opportunity to use that kind of model to then take the next innovation out as to ease the project finance or other financial constraints on innovation?
Yeah. Well look, YieldCo, first of all, what is it? You take anything in this world, anything, albeit power plant, water plant, chicken factory. If it generates enough cash, it generates consistent cash flow over a period of time, you can put it in a place and tell investors, I'm not touching it, all the cash flow is going to go to you. That's a YieldCo. Okay? Now, in terms of the next generation innovation, is going to be in emerging markets. It's about optimization of the delta between what's the true cash flow of the project and how much we give shareholders. Because today there's always a reserve. And that's okay to have that reserve when your market cap is $5 billion, but if your market cap is around 100 billion, then you're giving 15 billion worth of value to non-value added activities. So there's all these things. The other thing that's going to happen is, in some ways, a YieldCo, what it does, it doubles the price of, or doubles the value of renewable energy. So in the same token, it can be half the cost. If there's a lot of YieldCos, the cost will decline at some point, and then the numbers that I showed you, cut them in half. So that's what, I'm not planning on it, but I hope no investors are listening to this.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on community solar, because to me it looks like this fabulous opportunity to optimize the cost. You looked at 2020 price of solar at 4 cents a kilowatt hour. If someone can either own a piece of that plant or lease it long term, and that's their cost, it'd be great. But it looks like it only works in markets where there's a lot of really favorable legislation, and otherwise the utilities make it really unattractive.
You know the answer already, and it's a great idea. And the community solar, you'll allow people who potentially don't have rooftops that you're able to put solar on to have access to solar. So it's a great idea. We love it a lot. There's a question here. Just one moment.
Curious how you balance innovative ideas that come up through the organization versus maybe being approached from the outside. I know some companies are very hostile to outside ideas and only want things to come up from the inside.
Inside versus outside innovative ideas. I've been accused that I appreciate outside people more than inside people by some of my closest executives that I work with very closely. I think having an NIH mentality is deadly for a corporation. Is deadly because think about it this way. SunEdison is the most valuable, right? Well, we only have 2% market share. That means 98% of IQ is outside the company. So to go think that we know how to do it and the outside people don't know how to do it is really sooner or later will hurt us. So we try not to be that way. We try not to be that way. So we're open to all ideas, but we select few. So anybody who wants to talk to me, no problem. We can talk about it. Show me the real thing. And if I think the management team is good, the idea is good, they're credible, they have some real mathematical proof, I'll do it. And if not, I won't. And most ideas, usually, they don't fit. And I'm not saying that I understand all of it, because some things I'm wrong on. But we're open to all ideas. Because the minute you start becoming NIH, then you give a signal to the whole company that, yes, that's how it should be. But if you're open-minded, then all employees say, well, it seems like we're open-minded to new ideas.
Grow to the terawatt, multi-terawatt level. There's so much need out there. In the current kind of panel platform, do you see any kind of sustainable scalability issue there with just the quantities of material and the CapEx and the, we think 20 years is a long time, but when we build a power plant, it should be there for 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
And after 20 years, what are we going to just rip out all this stuff out of the ground? And what do we do with all that toxic stuff?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
So first of all, most of the material we use has nothing to do with toxic because it's silicon, glass, and aluminum. I think power plants will live a lot longer than what we think. That's actually one of the things about renewables that is a hidden gem. And that's why I want to be an owner of power plants. The reason why the cost is a given number is because we sign a 20-year contract because that's what we think the banks are willing to give us as a debt. But reality, the land is there, the trackers will live for 50 years, and most of the stuff is there, and the panels probably will extend to 30 years. Once we figure that out and design the formula like we design coal plants, which is 50-year life, the numbers that I showed you will be even lower. You have to, people have to get used to it. Look, in the past, 5 years ago, people used to think solar is so complicated. And oh, it's very high risk. It's a diode, right? I mean, how many engineers are here again? All right. You know what a diode is. I hope you do. All right. It's a diode. It's a freaking diode. But the guys in New York is like, oh my God, now they know it's low risk. They're willing to give us a lot more for it. In the long run, they'll give us even more. Just give it time. People it takes time to change. I just want to ensure, be cognizant of the time that you're in here. I don't want to keep everybody here. Just what up? All right.
Yeah, thank you for an incredibly engaging talk. This is above and beyond what I expected. And in terms of your international expansion, SunEdison is doing great things around the world. And if you could just sort of break down, in the last 4 years, and also maybe the 4 years into the future, sort of the way your decision-making process in emerging markets, but also elaborate a little bit on all of these sort of acquisitions that have happened. So, First Wind, for example, Terraform Power as well, lowering the cost of capital, but also, how do you maintain the culture? How do you maintain the social values? How do you maintain your sort of vision and platform as you hopefully, as solar not only is going to change the world, but as SunEdison is going to change the world as well?
Thank you. First of all, we train everybody on the culture. Anybody who comes into the company gets trained. We have a black belt, green belt program. We use the methodology to promote, demote, hire, and fire people. We're very serious about culture. And when we do an acquisition, culture alignment is one of the top items that we look at. Can we really work with these people for a long time? And our culture is not very narrow. It's pretty kind of encompassing of things that all human beings need, like treat people well, don't judge them, be curious, stuff like that. That's what we try to train, right? Now, in terms of the past and how we think about the future, we always go by the same mathematical equations. Like, how many countries are there that are named China? 1. How many countries are named India? 1. Brazil, 1. There's only few real countries that have high growth and have enough political protection for investments and have huge populations. So you go after those. You go after the countries that matter, and you focus on those, and you become really good at them. And that's what we've always done. And things that didn't make sense to us, we didn't go after. What is the largest solar market 5 years ago? Which country? Germany. How many projects did I do in Germany since I became CEO? 0. Okay, I did one with Q cells. I gave them modules or wafers. But really, I didn't do any. Why? Because there's no sun. It's simple. The cost, the economics don't work. It's not sustainable. I know the government was trying to support it, but it doesn't make sense. We can't see catching the wave one day. And I was told to be crazy, and the team that was with me, that we're going to India. Why did we go to India? Because at that time, India had 150 gigawatts. But they needed 950 by 2030 for them to catch up with China. Wow. Now that's a number. Do you think India will wake up one day? I'll bet that they will. Now, did we wait for a little bit of a time before they got there? Absolutely. Did we do some projects? Yeah, a couple of 100 megawatts. But now we're going to do gigawatts. Because we felt that India needs it. It's going to happen. It's preordained that China, India, Brazil, they're going to be superpowers. And you have to just go with the flow. Just the way the Nile River is. Nile River, 6,700 kilometers going north, tens of millions of years. That's it. You just go that way. You don't fight it. You don't go towards Sudan, right? So that's what it is. That's how we make those decisions. And today we're thinking about the same exact issues.
You had a great slide about where the cost is probably going. I would surmise that getting over the political barriers would be huge for your company. So do you have an explicit strategy on how you approach legislatures or the, because that's where you're going to...
we deal with it. We're not, Julie's there and Paulie's there, and they work on this stuff. We don't have one size fits all. The first thing you do in anything in government is you have to do what's right for the society there. That's number one. What's right for America, what's right for China, what's right for India. The minute you have that mindset, Then you start working with the governmental agencies and the local agencies to create policies that make sense. We never ask for a special deal. When we work with the Indian government, for example, we show that it's good for the whole industry. On solar water pumps, we showed the whole world what it is. We publicized it, told everybody, and anybody can access it. And we sat down with the Indian government about their 100 gigawatt plan. We told them exactly what it is, and we were okay for them to share it with all our competitors, and which they did, to get feedback. So in our approach, not one size fits all, but you always have to do what's right. Because since we believe the technology is going to be low cost, so we're going to win. Otherwise, we wouldn't be working on it. So that's how we deal with it.
Thank you. I have 4 questions, so you can just go.
Oh, 4? No, come on.
The first one I do want.
You can ask me number 2.
Number 2.
Yeah.
Well, the first one I want. Is there a way that I can find the other 10 principles?
No.
No. Okay, good. Got that. So
I actually look. I have them. I don't want to divulge them in one shot yet.
Okay.
Because I want to do some of these and just show a few of them step by step.
Okay. Okay.
But they're not that secret. You know, like all of them are not my own invention. All this stuff is other people. Like, for example, how do you do forecasting in a company? You have short, medium, and long term. How do you do short term? You confront reality. How do you long term? You think about changing the world. How do you do medium term? You create options and flexibility. It's pretty straightforward. It's not that complicated.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna. I don't have it written, and I'm not gonna.
No, that's fine. The other 3 you can sort of pick and choose. As someone who is interested in creating change, what advice would you give to a young person? That's 1. Number 2. I just forgot it. Well, the third one.
Right,
third
okay.
one was.
Let's answer that one.
Okay.
For a young person who wants to do change, number 1 is work on something you love. Because when you work on something you love, you'll never regret spending a day in that job. And then have the courage to believe in yourself. I mean, what's the worst case scenario? People think the worst case scenario, I'll get fired. That's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is you work for someone who is not that great, who puts you down and doesn't allow you to flourish. That's the worst case scenario in this country. Now, 500 years ago, getting any job is important. The worst case scenario is you get executed. But today, in this country, for people who are educated, and MIT grads, right, you can get a lot of jobs. The worst case scenario is you continue to work in a bad environment. So be courageous, because the worst case scenario is you staying there, not getting fired. Do what you love and be courageous.
What was the other 2 is, what was the most challenging thing you faced in transitioning from MEMC in 2009 to SunEdison now? And then probably the 4th one, I'd say, from an India perspective, you have sort of this balance between ultra mega and the small scale residential. What is your sort of stance in that sort of political question?
On India, actually, it's not a political question. You have to have both. You have to take care of villages, and you have to give big plans so that you can power factories. So you have to have both. It's not a. And in terms of the biggest challenge that I faced, the biggest challenge is me evolving and growing. Really, me maturing. It's as simple as that. There's strategic issues, board issues, cost issues, strategic issues, customer issues, people issues. There's all kinds of stuff. But reality is, it was all under my control, and it's my evolution as a leader was the number 1 priority. And that's the biggest challenge I had, is trying to change myself to be able to handle it. Yeah, you're welcome. 4 questions. Yeah.
So I think we're running a little bit low on time, but we do want to address some of the questions that were raised.
So the web is taking over. You do not count.
By
computers.
People who asked questions during registration, a lot of them were already covered, but one that I don't think has been quite yet is, do you see benefits for customers using stored excess energy for longer duration and for utilities dealing with the duck curve?
Oh, okay. So first of all, you know what the duck curve is? Who knows? Right, most of you. Okay, so I'll talk about it. So in a way, you know, we are generating so much solar power during the day that now we need actually negative demand to be able to balance the situation in California. That's what the duck curve is. You can solve it in many ways. Storage is one of them potentially, but maybe a combination of multiple technologies. Wind and solar. That's another way. Storage today for bulk storage for electricity is not cost competitive. in my view, and it won't be for another 10 years. In some places, it makes a lot of sense because the price is super high, like in Germany. It's around 30 euro cent a kilowatt hour. And 20 cents is taxes, and 10 cents is the price. So by self-consuming and putting things in a battery and then later on using it, you make money. And by 2019, this is the only way to have solar. But in terms of using it as bulk storage in California for the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be really tough unless there's breakthrough in these roadmaps. Okay.
Okay, one last one. How do you see the future of grid-connected solar generation versus behind-the-meter solar in North America?
Well, so solar, if you think about cost, it is generation, transmission, and distribution, right? When you are behind the meter, you're eliminating really the generation, the central generation and the transmission and distribution. You're eliminating really the transmission and the distribution costs. So naturally, residential and being on rooftops and being distributed is the way to go. Now, the cost today on the surface looks much higher than utility scale, but with time, it will catch up. In our own installations, some rooftop costs are lower than our utility scale because we need to create a substation and do other things that come with a solar plant. So I'm optimistic that as time progresses and we do more innovation, and many people here and many other companies, we will find that residential and rooftop and distributed is the way to go because you eliminate a lot of other societal investments.
Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Ahmad.
Teresa. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.